some new CBS News battleground tracker numbers for both of them. Out in California, Senator Bernie Sanders is up with 31% support. Former Vice President Joe Biden and Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren come in behind Sanders with 19 and 18% respectively. Former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg has 12%, and the rest of the field comes in at under 10%. Looking to Texas, the race is tighter. Bernie Sanders is in the lead here with 30%, but Joe Biden close behind him with 26%, and Elizabeth Warren comes in at 17% support. Michael Bloomberg is at 13%, and the rest of the field comes in at 6% or less. Joining us once again is CBS News Elections and Surveys Director Anthony Salvanto, and we want to bring in CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Ed, this was a big and much needed win for Joe Biden in South Carolina. What does this mean for him going into Tuesday?
Well, his team would tell you this is the momentum they need to convince any late deciding voter who is not a fan of Bernie Sanders to side with them instead. Our hope is that by the end of Tuesday, he emerges as the clear alternative to Sanders. It's pretty mathematically impossible, based on what polling is showing us right now, for somebody to surpass Sanders, especially because he's going to have such a big win, it looks like, in places like California. But they're hoping, the Biden team is, that in the next few days they're able to raise millions of dollars and, again, convince people that he is the leading alternative.
Anthony, does he have the enthusiasm that you say Sanders supporters?
Well, that remains a key difference between these candidates, which is that Bernie Sanders supporters are the most enthusiastic of all the top candidates. That's why his numbers remain so stable. Those folks turn out for him. But Joe Biden still has a challenge in that regard. His supporters are less enthusiastic about him. Can he motivate them to turn out, I think, remains a key question. And look, to that point, when you look at California, Texas, at these big delegate hauls, the Democrats give out delegates just the top finishers. And so they could very conceivably end up splitting the delegates along with some of these other candidates, and then we move on into the spring.
And there are a lot of delegates at stake here on Tuesday, 1,344. It's about 30% of what's needed for the nomination. So, Ed, how do the candidates sort of crack the threshold? Explain some of the math here.
So there's essentially two numbers to look at on Tuesday night. There's the perception number. Who wins the state? Who can say that they walked away winning the most states? But the more important number ultimately is the nomination number. Who gets closest to getting the 1,990 or 91 delegates you need to get over the threshold and win that nomination?
Because it's not winner take all.
It is not. You have to hit 15% in each congressional district and in the states. And so the numbers to look for are 15. So if you look at our California and Texas numbers right now, Mike Bloomberg's in trouble because he's not hitting 15%. This could have been a very expensive overuse of his money if he can't hit 15% in those two states. But this is why, despite not winning anything so far, Elizabeth Warren is still in this race, because she sees that she's doing well enough in California and in Texas and in a few of these other states likely that she can get above 15% and keep a pool of delegates that keeps her in the race going into later March and April.
And that Bloomberg number that you talk about is so critical, because if he does do just well enough to pick up delegates, if he picks up delegates in some regions of these states, even if he doesn't win them, then that changes the math for everybody else. Now he's a player, but if he falls just short of it, then all those delegates can go to other top candidates, to a Biden or to a Sanders, and that changes the math going forward for them.
And can $400 million in ad spending close that gap? That's the big gamble.
It could potentially. Look, and tonight he's doing something that hasn't been done in a while. He's buying 3 minutes of advertising on NBC and CBS to talk about the coronavirus and trying to cast himself as somebody who's a competent manager who could probably help solve this problem and would have tackled it sooner than the president. He can spend as much as he wants, but if he doesn't hit 15% in these states on Tuesday, it will have been for naught, essentially. Certainly they believe that they can go on into Florida and Arizona and Illinois next and try to compete in later March contests. But perhaps the biggest loser last night in South Carolina was Mike Bloomberg, because Joe Biden did so well. They needed Biden to stumble or to only win narrowly to help make the argument that he's the better moderate alternative.
It couldn't have felt good for Tom Steyer to have spent over $200 million, almost $300 million on spending.
It's a warning sign, because South Carolina was his petri dish. It was his test that if he could do it there, he could do it anywhere. He couldn't.
So Anthony and Ed, there are a lot of headlines after South Carolina saying this is now a two-person race, but there are still a lot of people on the field.
It remains a multi-candidate race. There's no question about it. And I think part of that is you look at Bernie Sanders and you look at, despite that enthusiasm that he has, can he grow it? Can he draw people to him? And when we ask folks, most of the people supporting Sanders say they've already liked him. They've liked him for a long time. But far fewer say they've taken a second or third look at him as he's won these early states. So can he translate any success he's had into momentum going forward and build on that 25, that 30% that he's already got? That, I think, remains a key question.
This will not be clean. This is going to be a messy contest. It's different than what we've seen before because we have so many candidates. We're down to 7, the magnificent 7, perhaps, who are going into Tuesday. Will the field shrink after Tuesday? Probably. But again, if you're somebody who can hit viability, 15% in a few of these states, you have no reason to get out yet.
It makes for some exciting political watching on Tuesday.
And very little sleep.
Yes.
Very little sleep.
A very
for
long
anyone.
night with delegates coming as we go.
All right. Well, we'll gear up for that with both of you. Thank you. We'll be right back.